All right. So this training video here is going to be specifically about quoting, which carriers to quote for which conditions, their level of leniency, which health conditions they accept. And then we're also going to go over how to quote certain carriers. You have to go to directly to their website to quote certain things. Also, we'll go over like kind of my theology on the coverage amounts that I quote specifically. And just for the sake of this recording and our business, we're going to be talking about final expense. So whole life. Obviously, with index universal life, IUL policies, it can be more complicated, and we'll briefly touch on it, but I don't want to, that can be very in depth. So we're just going to go over because 95% of what we're selling is whole life final expense. So that's mostly what we're going to focus on here. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and we'll get right into it. All right. So first off, when quoting, you typically, when we have a lead, right? Sometimes it's going to have their date of birth. Sometimes it's going to have their age, depending on the lead, right? So I'm not going to have the lead sheet pulled up or anything like that. But just one side note, if you're not, good at really doing the mental math in your head, just Google age calculator. I think I just literally Googled age calculator by date of birth, and you can pull up this website. There might even be better ones, but to quickly, if you have their date of birth, you want to quickly find out their age, just put in, all right, perfect, May 10th, 1950. All right, perfect. So this person is 75 years old, right? So obviously you can use tools like that, or you can just do it in your head. But so this is our quoting tool as of right now. We might have a different one. If you're watching this video further down the road, we might have a better one that's more specific to what we do. We used to have one that just had our carriers on there, but for whatever reason, it doesn't work anymore. So this is the one that we're using right now. It's the one that's in the minimize this. It's the one that's in the new agent resources PDF that everyone should have access to. It is linked right here. This is the link for this right here. So you click that, you open it, it's going to open this tool that I'm already on, right? So whenever you're in here to quote somebody, it's really simple. Say you type in the coverage amount you're looking for, right? So say $15,000 of coverage. You don't even have to change the state. I never change the state because it's the same for every single state. Then you update male or female, and then you put in the client's age. So we'll just do 65 years old. Then you hit get quote. You can usually just leave nicotine as non-smoking, especially, or just leave that as none. Especially if they go to the VA, you can just leave that as none because if they are a smoker, hopefully you're going to be able to use Americo, which gives the same rate for non-smokers as long as they quit within the next 3 years. So then you come in here, you type in the coverage amount you're looking for, or the multiple coverage amounts, right? Like on a typical, close, you're going to give them three options. So maybe you do a 10,000, a 15,000, and a 20,000. And you're typically writing these down as you're going through the script with them. Or maybe if you're brand new, you got to say, all right, give me a second, sir. I'm going to put you on a brief hold so I can go ahead and get these numbers generated for you in our system. Okay. So you usually give them like three options, right? A bronze, a silver, and a gold, a 10,000, a 15,000, and a 20,000, or maybe a 5,000, an 8,000, and a 12,000. And we're kind of get into that at the end, but I want to go over quickly what carriers to use for what situations and how to look for them in this tool, right? So first carrier that we use is Mutual of Omaha for final expense, right? A lot of people, when they're quoting Transamerica, they will mess up and they will accidentally quote this immediate solution preferred. This is not their whole life product. I wish it didn't show on here, but it does. Ignore this. For whole life, if you're doing Transamerica, you're going to want to quote the one that says Express Select. That is Transamerica's whole life product, Express Select. Okay. Mutual of Omaha, their final expense, their whole life is called the Living Promise. Americo, it's Eagle Select One. The next one that we use here, we don't use Trinity, we don't use Sentinel, we don't use Foresters, we don't use Aflac or Liberty Banker. The next one we use is Corebridge. When you're quoting Corebridge, hit this little drop down arrow right here, and it will show you the accidental death rate. If they're under 75 years old, I typically, or 75 or younger, I will typically quote the accidental rate. That way, if they die in an accident, the coverage amount doubles. It's typically like $3 to $5 more, depending on what the premium is. Um, we also use, so that's Corebridge. If they're over 75, it's not going to give you that option. So, for example, if you put in here 76 years old, get quote, you go to Corebridge, it's not even, when you drop down, there's not going to be an accidental, right? American Amicable. Same thing with American Amicable and with Americo, you can do double accidental over 75. However, if they're over 75, I personally don't even bring up double accidental because maybe I use Corebridge for that client because maybe they only have a credit or debit card. And then I don't want to have to tell the client, hey, because you only have a credit or debit card, I have to use this particular carrier and they don't offer double accidental because you're too old for it. So just to keep all my options open, I don't quote double accidental if they're over 75. So we do use American Amicable. We do use Corebridge, also known as American General. Again, don't use Aflac, don't use Liberty, don't use SBLI, don't use Royal Neighbors, don't use Foresters. This again is an IUL, so you're typically not quoting this. This is Transamerica's whole life product, so you can quote this. Corebridge and Transamerica are the only two carriers that accept credit or debit cards. Don't use Baltimore Life, don't use UHL. This again is the IUL. And then CVS. We do use CVS. Again, CVS doesn't do, I have it at 76 right now. Let's bring this back down to say 70. Aetna, again, don't use the one that says this. This is Aetna. Yes, it's the same company, but that is not the rate. Look for the one that says CVS Health. Ascendo Preferred. That is the name of their whole life product is Ascendo Preferred. And you can do double accidental on Aetna or on CVS if they're under 70, 75 or younger. So again, that is confusing. I know, hopefully we have a better tool for this that doesn't show all these options we don't have access to in the future, but this is what we have for right now. So do not quote the one that says Aetna Protection Series Preferred. Quote the one that says Ascendo Preferred. That is their whole life product. That is what we sell for final expense, right? So it's quote, if you're using quoting Aetna, you can use that one. Um, yeah, and then this is Americo Select 2. So that is for like their secondary. It's kind of like they're graded. It's not graded though, doesn't put them on a 2-year waiting period. But when you're doing an Americo quote, if it picks up prescriptions or conditions that they don't like, it's going to either give you two options. It's going to raise their price and say, hey, to keep this same coverage amount. So for this example here, instead of paying 77 bucks, you might get the pop-up and it'll say, okay, instead of 77 bucks, it'll be 102 a month. You can talk to the client if they're okay with that, or it'll give you the option to keep it at 77 and give them a lower rate or give them a lower coverage amount if you want to keep that same price. Um, and then, yeah, so those are the ones we use. Again, just to go through that one more time here. So we use Americo, Eagle Select 1, Mutual of Omaha, Living Promise. But honestly, if you're going between, I typically don't really quote Mutual of Omaha for whole life. That's just me because Americo has a way easier application and they do a better bonus. So, there's really no reason, in my opinion, to quote Mutual of Omaha. So I'm usually, unless, I don't know, there's really not any situation where you need to do that. So, or I mean, I guess Mutual of Omaha does go higher coverage, maybe like if you're trying to do, let me see here, say you want to do a higher coverage amount. Oh, nope, never mind. So there's really no reason to quote Mutual of Omaha, in my opinion. But if you want to do it, you definitely can for their Living Promise product. But again, just to go through this one more time to show the carriers that we use for final expense, it's Americo, Mutual of Omaha, CVS, Corebridge, American Amicable, and Transamerica. Those are the main ones that we quote. Now, you can also quote with Ethos. Ethos, however, you do have to go directly to their portal. So you log in, hit quote an application, and then create quote. Hit Advantage Whole Life, male or female, throw in a date of birth, smoker, non-smoker, and then throw their state in. Again, it doesn't really matter for the state if you're just getting the quote. And then hit get results. And then with Ethos, you have to quote directly on their portal. And then you can just slide this bar up and down. Ethos is good for whole life, in my opinion, because they can do as low as 5,000 or as high as 100,000. They're the only carrier that will go up to $100,000 of coverage for a whole life policy. So if you got to do over 50,000, because the maximum for whole life, the maximum coverage amount, and this doesn't happen too often, the maximum coverage amount for Corebridge is like 25 to 35,000, depending on their age. And then American Amicable, I believe, goes up to 50K. Transamerica goes up to 50K, but Transamerica starting in 2026 is actually going up to 100K, which is great. Americo goes up to 50K. I think Mutual goes up to 50K. Um, Aetna, I believe, goes up to like 35K. Could be wrong. Play around with it. You can find out. But yeah, ethos is good. If they're 65 or younger, a lot of times I've realized, and again, just throw some ages in there, play around with it. But it's kind of weird. So with, say you're doing somebody who's 70 years old with Corebridge, for example, it'll be 168. Ethos, 30K. I gotta update the date of birth. Well, let's just do this. So 3/6/1960. What would that make them? 60, 55. Yeah, make them about 56 years old. So Corebridge for somebody 56 doesn't even do 30K, so can't do that example. But all right, well, I'm not going to show exact, but what I'm trying to say here for the sake of the video is usually if they're 65, around 60 to 65, Ethos is going to be on par price-wise with Corebridge. If they're over 65, Ethos starts to become a little bit more expensive. But I've realized throughout doing this, quoting people, that if you're under 60 years old, a lot of the times Ethos actually has really good whole life rates, like it's comparable to Americo, and it'll be cheaper than Corebridge. I'm not saying go out and use Ethos just because Ethos is not bonusable. Typically, I use Ethos for people that are unhealthy, or if they're really young and because they can get really good rates with whole life, or if they just want like a really big coverage amount and they're younger, that's a really good situation where you might want to use Ethos. Um, but yeah, so quoting with Ethos, you got to go directly to the website, and then also with Americo, if you notice here, Americo does not have the drop down. So Americo, for whatever reason, it doesn't allow you to quote the double accidental rate. So if you want to quote double accidental with Americo, you have to go directly to their application. Oh man, come on. Give me a second so I can log in. Sorry, I know I'm speaking really fast. Like pause this video, slow it down if you need to. I'm just trying to, for the sake of time here. So say you're quoting somebody, you can put it with America, you can put in the age or the date of birth. Say you want to quote, again, if you want to quote their final expense policy, let's actually make this 65 so I can show you more options. Say you want to quote the term policy. You just click this calculator here for term. You want to quote final expense. You just click that calculator here. You want to quote an IUL. You click the calculator here. So for IUL for Americo, or if you're doing double accidental, or if you're doing a term policy with Americo, you have to come directly to this portal. Actually, same thing with Ethos. If you want to quote an Ethos IUL or you want to quote an Ethos term, you have to come directly here. One thing I will say is with Ethos, I've never seen anybody, no matter how good their health is, get approved for preferred plus. So typically do standard or preferred. Standard if you want to be safe, to be honest with you, with a term policy. Back to this though. So say you want to quote a whole life policy with Americo. You click on this calculator here, you put in their date of birth, male or female, nicotine use, yes or no, and then you put in the coverage amount and you click yes here for double accidental, and it'll show you the rates. All right, so say you want to do $20,000 in coverage, it'll show you the double accidental. If you don't want the double accidental, there's really no reason to even come to this quoter. You can do it from this tool right here, but you just click yes for double accidental and then it adds it in there. It's usually like a 10% or an 8% difference, right? Based off whatever the premium is. Like it's typically 8% of that. Add that on. You can also do the mental math if you want to. I believe it's around 8%. Quoting the Mutual of Omaha IUL, which Mutual of Omaha and Americo, both their IULs are good. A Mutual of Omaha is a little bit better for the client. Um, and if you want to come in, the Mutual of Omaha tool, again, it's in the new agent resources PDF. It's right here. So you just click that, open Safari, boom, I'm already on it. So put in the age. Americo IUL only goes up to 70 years old. Mutual of Omaha IUL goes up to 75. Enter in the state, you enter the client's age, you enter the face amount you're looking for. They will go up to $300,000 in coverage for an Easy Solve Index Universal Life. Easy Solve means immediate approval. If they are over 75, I believe it only goes up to 150K. Yep, so it only go up to 150,000. Now, when we're Typically, 95% of the policies you're going to sell with final expense and the leads we get are going to be whole life. So you're going to use this quote 95% of the time, right? Maybe you come over here to America if you want to quote the double accidental, if that person's healthy under 75, right? Just know, and a lot of people, they want to get the deal, right? They want to get that client the best deal. They want to get the most amount of coverage for the lowest premium, which you should always do. However, to qualify for an IUL, they have to be very healthy, like nothing wrong with them pretty much at all. High blood pressure, that's it. If they have anything more than high blood pressure, they will not qualify for an index universal life policy. So, if they have IUL, diabetes, COPD, and you're like, man, this person goes to the VA, I can probably get him approved with an IUL. You can try, but you're probably going to get denied. And then you're probably going to lose that deal because you got to go back to your client and say, hey, Mr. Client, I know I told you we could get you $50,000 of coverage for only 150 bucks, but you weren't approved, so it's $300. Is that okay? And they're going to say no, right? So, I mean, yes, you might be able to sweet talk them into it. Hopefully you can, right? Hey, sir, we're still going to be able to get you the best coverage amount. I'm looking through all the carriers. I've done my best. This is the absolute best rate we can get. Obviously, come to them, try all the carriers, come to them with the best quote. However, I'm just telling you right now, if they have health issues, anything more than just high blood pressure, they probably will not get approved for an IUL product. So I wouldn't try it. Um, and then as far as which carrier to use for which health conditions, on the new agent resource PDF, I'm not going to read this through line by line. I'm just going to give you my theology here. But if you're a new agent, I typically recommend quoting Corebridge most of the time to be safe. Not only is Corebridge lenient, but they also accept a credit or debit card. Corebridge and Transamerica are the only two carriers that will accept a credit or debit card. America is the cheapest, but the strictest. When I have a client on the phone, America will accept high blood pressure, diabetes, sometimes some other things, right? Some anxiety, depression medications. If they go exclusively to the VA, you might have luck with other things. But America is the cheapest because they're the strictest, because they are the strictest. New agents always tend to do this thing where they quote Americo for all their clients because they're trying to get the deal. And I get it. You want to get that client the best rate, you want to get the deal. However, Americo is the strictest. If they have COPD, if they have had cancer, they're not going to get approved with Americo. They're just not. So I'm sorry, but you're probably better off quoting Corebridge. Corebridge accepts diabetes, neuropathy. They accept COPD. They're lenient on non-serious stage one cancers. If they have if they have or had cancer in the last 5 years or so, you must press yes to prostate, bladder, or breast cancer. Obviously, if they're a woman, they don't have a prostate or breast cancer, right? But they will accept bladder cancer. They will accept prostate cancer. You just press that they've had that. It's not stage one. Also, if they have diabetes with a Corebridge, press 8.6 or less and no to insulin. America. They're the cheapest carrier for smokers. They will give somebody the non-smoking rate. They just have to quit smoking within 3 years. Americo goes up to age 85. American Amicable up to age 85. Corebridge only goes up to age 80. Again, read through this, guys. Um, 90% of what I'm telling you right now, you would know just from reading this through right here. But you can admit you will get accepted. If somebody just has diabetes and high blood pressure, I'm going Americo, right? Americo, admit diabetes. Americo will ask you when that client was diagnosed. Obviously, put in what is true there. But most of the time, with the people we're selling, the older people with final expense, they have been diagnosed with diabetes for a while. Americo is probably going to approve it if they were diagnosed more than 10 years ago. They might not approve it if they were just diagnosed recently. American Amicable is very lenient underwriting. It's going to ask you the physician, Google the physician in that state, or ask the physician they go to and put that physician in there. If you forget to ask, just find one in that state or put in VA hospital in that area. Um, Ethos. Again, Ethos is the most lenient, right? Ethos can be like the last resort because if you can't get somebody approved, and that's why I say quote Corebridge, because a lot of the times Corebridge, their rates are just on par with Ethos. And if you get denied Ethos, then you can pivot over to, or sorry, if you get denied Corebridge, you can pivot over to Ethos. Americo Select 2, I kind of went over that. It is their more expensive rate because they're accepting more things. They'll take heart medications, heart issues, etc. Ethos or Corebridge guaranteed. I think clients above 80 Your options are Aetna, Americo, Ethos, American Amicable. Just know with American Amicable, over age of 80 years old, they do cut your commission by a little bit. And then IULs, again, they got to be pretty healthy for an IUL, right? If you ever thinking about quoting, when I'm going into quoting Corebridge, or sorry, when I'm going into quoting Americo, or I'm going into quoting an IUL, people will lie, people will forget, right? So I'll typically ask the question before I'm going to quote an IUL. If they say they're healthy, they answer no to everything, I'm going to ask them, sir, or ma'am, in the last 5 to 10 years, are there any hospitalizations, any medications or prescriptions you have been prescribed at all? Like anything at all, anything you can think of except for over-the-counter medications. And then they'll probably be like, "Oh yeah, 3 years ago I was given this," and then okay, I probably can't go in IUL because that's going to be on their health record, right? Um, so I tip again, it's like Americo is the least strict, and that's why they're the cheapest, right? So if they are very healthy, high blood pressure, diabetes, you can go Americo. But if it's anything more than high blood pressure, diabetes, I would not quote Americo. If they've had stents, if they've had cancer, they've had heart attacks, if they had strokes, new agents will be like, "Oh, but there was, it was 4 years ago. Like they said they're doing great." The insurance carriers don't care. They see that this person had a heart attack 4 years ago, right? Like, or they saw they had a pacemaker put in, or they had afibrillation, or they had you know what I mean? Like they have Eliquis, they have a heart medication. They're not going to get approved from America. So you can quote that. However, you're probably going to have to tell your client, "Hey, sorry, sir, I don't know what I'm doing, and I gave you the wrong plan, and it's actually going to be $20 more a month, and you're risking that client canceling, right?" So if you're in doubt, play it safe and just quote Corebridge because it's kind of that middle policy. It's that middle one where best case scenario, sometimes I will quote Corebridge thinking I can get this person approved with Americo, but I'm still gonna, if I'm unsure, like I'm not positive, I'm gonna quote Corebridge and then I'll do the application on the phone with that client. Say I got them for $10,000 of coverage for $80 a month with Corebridge, and then I quote America, I go to the application with Americo, I get them approved. With Americo, you get that little green box that says they got the pre-approval, then I'll be like, "Congratulations, sir. I was able to get you 11,000 or $12,000 of coverage for that same rate I told you earlier. So congratulations. We're going to be leaving your wife an extra $2,000 of coverage. Who's the best agent ever?" Then you're the good guy instead of the bad guy, right? And these are things you kind of learn over time. You're going to fall on your face and you're going to mess up and probably lose some policies in the beginning, but it's a part of it. Everybody goes through it. Making this video to try to like avoid that. But just know, Americo is the cheapest, but they're also the strictest. Same with Mutual of Omaha. Mutual of Omaha and Americo are roughly the same when it comes to the leniency as far as like the approval. Corebridge is very lenient. American Amicable is very lenient. Aetna is surprisingly lenient, or CVS, they're surprisingly lenient in my history here. I've got people that have gotten Americo Select 2, but they get approved immediate Select 1 or whatever the premier policy preferred with CVS. So CVS is sneaky lenient in my opinion. They're a really good carrier. They're not bonusable, but they are a good carrier. Simple text code as well. So with Americo, go back over here. So with Americo, Corebridge, it's email and text authorization. They have to click a link, sign it. Americo and Aetna. So Americo, it's just two text messages they read back to you. They read you back a 6-digit authorization code for the health authorization for Americo, and then one to submit the policy. So for Americo, it's two text message authorizations they have to read back to you. Aetna or CVS, it's just one. So it's just one text message they read back to you, one 6-digit code. Transamerica, same thing as Americo. It's one to do the health authorization, then another 6-digit code to submit the application. Corebridge, it's text or email. They have to open a little DocuSign, type in the last four of their social, hit I accept. And then when they're submitting the policy, they have to actually DocuSign something, which can be a little difficult. American Amicable has like 7 different signing choices: email, text, voice authorization. Um, yeah, there's a bunch of them. Um, and that's pretty much it. All I can really think about as far as like which one to quote. Again, read through this. It kind of gives you a guideline, a crash course on it. But in the beginning, to keep it safe, Corebridge is the easiest because with Americo, you have to have the client on the phone, right? You have to have the client. I mean, you really supposed to have the client on the phone for all of these. However, with Corebridge, you can always, call them back. You can do the email thing. So with Americo, just know you do have to have that client on the phone. Never use your own phone number to sign the client for a policy. That is fraud, and they will immediately cancel your contract. Immediately. It's a huge red flag, right? When you're doing when you're doing signing for Americo, never put in your own phone number. Or that goes with any carrier. That should be obvious, but I'm going to say that anyways. Um, and then yeah, just know like as they get more expensive, they get more lenient, right? I can't say that enough. If anybody has anything more than high blood pressure and diabetes, they're probably not going to get approved with Americo. Sometimes if they go exclusively to the VA, you'll get lucky. But again, I wouldn't be quoting Americo if somebody's had a heart attack or if they've had cancer. You should quote Corebridge or Ethos because they're more lenient. Um, and then my kind of thought process on like the prices to quote. So to keep it simple, in the script, right, we ask them their income, right? So pull up the script here. So in the script, we ask them their income, right? Working retired, how much you bringing in per month, Bob? You make 6 grand a month? Awesome. He's got some money. I can probably give him higher prices. If they're struggling, he's like, oh man, dude, at the end of the month, like we're left over with 50 bucks. Like, you got to go lower options, right? You can't give these people more. You can't try to sell them more than they can afford. Even if they do it, it's probably going to be a chargeback later down the road, right? Like we're in the business of trying to help these people, helping them protect their families, giving them the most amount of coverage, finding them the best carrier for the lowest monthly rate, but it has to be something they can afford, right? So, as a general rule of thumb, I'm typically giving somebody a bronze option around 70 bucks, a silver option around 100 bucks, and then a gold option around 130 bucks, whatever those numbers are. For cremation, I'll typically quote like if they're older, 5,000, 8,000, 12,000, or 5,000, 7,000, 10,000. And then for burial, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. But if they're younger, right? If they're younger, the rates are going to be better. So I'm going to quote somebody differently that's 60 versus 80, right? If somebody's 60 years old, $10,000 of coverage, even with, Corebridge, even with double accidentals, only be 50 bucks a month. Like I'm not going to do a policy. I try not to do policies less than like $50 a month. Obviously, if somebody's like dead broke, I'll give them a $30 option, right? But like I try to avoid that, right? So it's like you got to try to just feel them out with quoting and figure out what it is they can afford, how solid this client is, how much of a laydown they are, give them what they can afford, but also do what you got to do to get the deal, right? I'm not saying sit here and lie to clients and say, oh, yeah, you just need $5,000. That's going to cover a full burial because it won't. Don't ever lie to these people, like ever, 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 no matter what you're doing. That is like the number one rule to take away from anything, right? This is a regulated industry. You lie, you get caught, you're going to get fired. Um, and if for whatever reason you quote somebody a price, they don't get approved for it, you have to raise their price. Call that client back and explain why. Hey, sir, because of the COPD, this carrier that I was hoping to get you approved you with did not approve you. But I tried 20 different carriers for you, sir, and we were able to get you approved for that $10,000 of coverage. It's only $12 more. It's gonna be 142 a month. Is that okay with you, sir? 90% of the time, if you word it properly and you let them know you're doing the best you can for them, it's going to be okay. You're not going to lose the deal. But be honest with clients, and you can't get them back on the phone. Make sure you text them so you have a paper trail telling them how much the policy is, right? Don't ever lie to clients. Do everything the right way, and you're going to go a lot further in this business than somebody who lies because they're going to have a lot more chargebacks. They're going to be out of the business really quick, and they're probably going to lose their contracts. Or they're going to lose their license and get fired anyway. So don't lie to clients. Do everything the right way. It's going to take you a lot further in life and in this business for sure. Um, what else I'm trying to say here? But yeah, so with quoting, it's like you just gotta kind of feel them out. Like, all right, can this client afford a $150 policy? Should I show them one for 70 bucks, one for 100 bucks, one for 150? Or should I show them a $60, an $80, and a $100? You got to kind of figure out what the client can afford and how much it depends on their age and how much coverage they need. I know this is confusing in the beginning, but after you're doing this for a couple months or a couple weeks, you'll kind of get the feel of it. Like, all right, burial. The cheapest burial is like 7, 8 grand minimum, right? Really like $8,000, right? So, and then cheapest cremation will probably be like, I mean, you could get a cremation done for like 2 or 3 grand, but realistically, if they're going to have a service, it's 4 or 5 grand. The only time I'm ever going to quote under $5,000 of coverage, and the only carrier you can even do that with is Aetna, CVS. But the because all the other carriers minimum 5,000. Aetna, CVS will go under 5,000. The only time I'll ever quote under $5,000 of coverage is if the person's like 80, 85, 86, over 85, you only have Aetna as an option anyways, right? Like if you put in 87 years old, the only option is Aetna. So yeah, right here. So as you see, 87 years old, $5,000 of coverage. It's 140 bucks a month. Like it's kind of expensive for 5,000 in coverage, you know? So the only time I'm quoting like 2,000 or $3,000 of coverage is if the person is really old and they just need some sort of coverage. That way their wife, their son, or somebody has some money to lay them to rest properly. That's the only time I'm going to quote under 5,000 is if they're over 85 years old, just to make it affordable, give that person some coverage so they're leaving something for their family. Um, Besides that, though, it is kind of a lot of feel. I wish I could sit here and be like, yes, if this person is 70 years old, you should quote 7,000, 10, 15. But like, it doesn't work that way. You know, this is sales. You got to figure out the best way, the best policy, and the best situations for that client. As a general rule of thumb, I'm giving them a 70 to $80 premium as the bronze, 95 to 90 to 110, around say 100 bucks average as the silver, and then 120 to 150, say $130 average as the gold, right? For simple final expense policies. However, if somebody's saying they're like, oh yeah, at the end of the month we got $2,000 left over, awesome. I might quote them 100, 150, $200 a month, you know, or even higher, 100, 200, $300 a month. You just got to figure out how much this person can afford. And it also depends on the why, right? This video isn't going to be a training on building the why, right? That was kind of covered in some previous videos. And obviously, if you're struggling with that, there's a million training videos online that we've put out there about that specifically. And we do a training every single Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern on building the why. However, the bigger the why, the more coverage that person's going to want, right? So if you've got them sold on, okay, I need to get my burial taken care of, and they want to leave some extra money behind to help their wife with the mortgage and the other bills that are going to pop up whenever they pass away, then you're going to be able to quote bigger prices because you have a bigger why. That person feels like they need more coverage, right? And that just depends on you as a salesperson. Um, but yeah, so whole point of this video is just know that we have a couple different, you have a bunch of different options when it comes to quoting different carriers. It can be confusing in the beginning. I get it. I promise it will feel less overwhelming over time. However, when you're getting going, it's really tempting to want to quote Americo because they're the cheapest final expense carrier that we have. However, if that person has COPD, that person has had a heart attack, they're not going to get approved with Americo Select One. They're just not. So quote a more expensive carrier. Yes, it might feel like it's harder to get the deal, but you're probably going to lose that deal anyways. If you quote sell them, get them sold on a $50 premium, you have to call them back and tell them it's 80 bucks, right? So quote what you think they can get approved for, right? And again, we have the new agent resource PDF here that I put together that has the underwriting tips and rules of thumb. If you're new, I recommend just start quoting with Corebridge for the most part because again, they're lenient, they do the email, and you can accept a credit or debit card. Whereas Americo, American Amicable, Aetna, they're only going to accept routing and account number, which side note, you should always be pushing for the routing and account number regardless. But read through these. It kind of gives you a crash course on quoting, when to quote, which medications are accepted for which situation, blah, blah, blah. And if you have specific questions, ask. You know, this is why we have the Discord, so you can ask questions in real time. Um, but yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Whole point of this video again is just to kind of give a crash course on which carriers to quote with and how to quote price wise. Again, cremation 5,000, 7,000, 10,000, or 5,000, 10,000, 15,000. Burial 8,000, 12,000, 16,000. Or I like to do thousands. I don't like to do 500s, right? Like so, but then again, if they're younger, I'm going to do like 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, you know? Again, you want to give these people prices they can afford, but also you want to help them get good options. And another prices they can afford for their age, right? So like somebody who's 85 years old, I'm probably going to show them smaller coverage amounts than I'm going to show somebody who's 60 because it's going to be cheaper for a 60-year-old than an 85-year-old, obviously. Um, what else? Yeah, I'm trying to think like anything other tips I can give on quoting. But again, if you need help, ask for it. Hopefully this was a good enough crash course. I know I was speaking really fast, but just know biggest thing here too is when you're quoting Transamerica, it's the express select. It's not the immediate solution. Um, and then, yeah, I went over the carriers we don't use. So do not use those. Do not quote Royal Neighbors or SBLI or, Oxford Life or Liberty Banker. We don't use those carriers. I know it shows up on the quoting tool. I apologize. Maybe by the time you're watching this video, we'll have a better one that doesn't show those. But for right now, that's all I got.